Okay, so today we're going deep diving into something that might, sound a little academic at first, but trust me, it's super relevant,
Hmm.
especially if you're into education or just how people learn, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Like how we learn together, right?
Exactly. We're talking about purposeful and productive instructional groups.
PPIGs.
PPIGs, oh yeah. I think we all remember those from school, some better than others.
Huh, right. The goal is all about collaboration, critical thinking, all that good stuff, but does it really work that way?
That's the big question.
Yeah. Well, our deep dive today is coming from Jaime Hoerricks. She's got this piece in the outside, episode 82, PPIGs.pdf. And she digs into some real challenges with these groups, especially in classrooms where you've got like a whole mix of learners, full inclusion classrooms.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think that's where receptive language processing, RLP, that really comes in.
RLB. Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. Basically, it's how we understand spoken language.
Yeah.
And we often assume everyone's on the same page, but that's so not true. So like some kids process things faster, some slower.
Yeah, exactly. And Horrocks points out how this can make PPIGs, really tough for some students, especially those with specific learning disabilities, SLDs, or those who are Gestalt language processors, those GLPs.
Okay, so hold on. We've got PPIGs, we've got RLP, now SLDs and GLPs. I'm trying to keep up.
I know, right? There's a lot of acronyms, but it all ties together because, if you're in a group and can't process what's being said fast enough, you're already behind.
Yeah, no kidding. So these PPIGs, instead of being all collaborative and fun, they could actually be like shutting out the very students who need that collaboration the most.
That's exactly what Horrocks is saying. And it's why, we need to rethink how we approach these groups. And that's where Universal Design for Learning, UDL, comes in big time.
Now, UDL, I know you're a big fan.
Oh, yeah, guilty as charged, but for good reason. Because, look, so often we try to, fix the student, make them fit the classroom. UDL flips that whole thing. It asks, how do we make the classroom work for every student?
Okay, I like that. Flipping the script. So, is that how Horrocks uses UDL to make PPIGs actually inclusive?
She does, and she gets really specific. She breaks down how each of the three main UDL principles, those are multiple means of representation, then action and expression, and then engagement, how each of those can apply to these groups.
Okay, those are some big ideas. Can you walk me through each one, like concrete examples of how they play out in a PPIG?
You got it. So first up, multiple means of representation. This one's all about giving info in ways that aren't just talking. So think visual aids alongside verbal instructions, or even, letting students explore the material through tech.
So instead of just telling a group like, hey, here's how to do this experiment, you'd also have diagrams, written steps, maybe even a quick video?
Exactly. That way, a student who struggles with auditory processing, they don't automatically get left behind.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. Now, what about that second principle? Multiple means of action and expression.
Okay, so that's all about letting students show what they know in ways that, work for them. Not everyone's good at the same things, right? So instead of forcing a presentation, maybe they make a visual, write a report, or even build something to show their understanding.
Okay, I see. So in a PPIG, this could mean roles that match those strengths. Like a student who's great at visuals could be the graphic organizer, while someone else who loves to write becomes the note taker.
You got it. And that way you're not just accommodating different learners, the whole project becomes more interesting for everyone.
Right, yeah. Okay, so then that third principle, multiple means of engagement, how does that fit in?
All right, this one taps into student interest, keeps them motivated.
Right.
So in a PPIG, you might structure roles so each person gets to really shine. Maybe one student loves research, they lead that part. Someone else is great at explaining, they could present to the class.
It's like building a mini team.
Right.
Each person's essential, but they bring different skills.
Exactly. Like a puzzle, all the pieces matter.
I love that. Okay, but I'm guessing this takes more than just slapping a PPIG label on a lesson plan, right?
Oh, you're telling me Horrocks is big on planning, like really knowing your students before designing the activity, who needs what are their strengths, all that.
Yeah. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all thing. Each PPIG becomes kind of custom-made for that group.
Yeah, you could say that. And it's not just on the teacher either. Horrocks says administrators got to provide the time, the training, the resources, the whole shebang.
Otherwise, it's just another thing piled on top of everything else teachers have to do.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, right? How many of these PPIGs, even if they're well-intentioned, how many have just, fallen apart because they didn't have that foundation?
Yeah, good point. And then what happens when you've got, those prepackaged curricula with their strict schedules? How do you fit in something so individualized?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question. And it's a real struggle for
Well,
teachers.
they just have to, like, chuck the pacing guide out the window.
Yeah. Not necessarily. Hoerricks is all about finding that balance, meeting those learning goals, but getting creative,
Right.
redesigning stuff, adjusting the pace, giving extra help where needed. It's about working with the curriculum, not letting it, totally boss you around.
Okay, so she's not saying PPIGs are bad. She's just saying we need a whole new approach. And she even gives specific strategies for teachers, right?
She does. 9 of them, actually, and they're super insightful.
9. Okay, we got to dive into those.
We will, but first, I think we need a little break, process all this. We've covered a lot.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be back in a jiffy to keep unpacking all this.
Can't wait. One thing that really strikes me about Hoerricks' work is how she takes these big, kind of overwhelming concepts like UDL, and she makes them actually usable for teachers. It's not just theory, it's like she's giving them actual tools.
Yeah, totally. And one of the tools that really caught my eye was this idea of silent collaboration. It sounds kind of, I don't know, like a contradiction.
Yeah.
How could you collaborate without, talking?
Right. It seems counterintuitive at first, but I think that's part of what makes it so brilliant. Hoerricks argues that by actually removing the spoken language, you're leveling the playing field.
So for students who struggle with processing like auditory stuff, or who just take a bit longer to put their thoughts into words, this could be huge.
Absolutely. Imagine a brainstorming session, right? But everyone's writing their ideas down on a shared doc, or they're building a mind map together, but all without saying a word.
Wow. Yeah, that would force you to think differently about how you communicate.
Exactly. And for some students, especially those who are more introverted or those who get overwhelmed by a lot of verbal stuff, this could be a huge relief.
It's like giving them permission to participate in a way that actually works for them.
Precisely. And you never know, it might even lead to some more creative ideas that wouldn't have come out in a, typical talk-heavy setting.
I like that. Another strategy that kind of intrigued me was this idea of focusing talk on simple exchanges. I think we've all been in those group projects where the conversation just goes off on a tangent.
Oh, for sure. And for students who are already struggling to keep up, that kind of chaotic back and forth can be just totally overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose, You can't process it all, let alone contribute.
Totally. So Hoerricks suggests that we shift the focus from these long-winded discussions to more concise and focused exchanges.
So less is more in this case.
Exactly. It's about teaching students how to get their ideas across clearly and quickly without all the extra fluff.
Okay, so it's about being mindful of the pace of the conversation and making sure everyone has time to process and, actually think.
Right. It might mean setting time limits, giving specific prompts to guide the conversation, or even actually modeling how to have these focused exchanges for the students.
So instead of just saying, discuss this topic, you might say something like, you have 3 minutes to share your most important takeaway, or what are 2 questions this chapter raised for you?
Exactly. That kind of structure makes the conversation not only more accessible for everyone, but also more productive and probably leads to a deeper understanding.
This makes me think about how we communicate in general, not just in school. We could all probably benefit from being a little more mindful of how much we talk and how well we're actually getting our ideas across.
Totally. It's a valuable skill for literally every aspect of life.
Now, we've talked about silent collaboration and focused conversations, but what about this idea of structuring group roles to play to individual strengths?
Yeah. This is all about recognizing that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. It's about celebrating those unique skills that each student brings to the table and creating roles that let those talents shine.
Okay, so instead of those generic roles like note taker or presenter, you might have roles that are more specific to the individual strengths of each student.
Exactly. Imagine a student who loves to draw, right? They could be the visual storyteller for the group, responsible for creating illustrations or graphic organizers to help the group understand the concepts.
Or what about a student who's a research whiz?
Yeah.
They could be the information guru, right?
Sure.
The one who gathers and synthesizes all the info from different sources.
Exactly. When you align roles with individual strengths, you're not only making the group work more effective, you're also boosting motivation and engagement.
Right, because they're actually doing something they're good at and enjoy.
Precisely. And it creates that sense of belonging, that feeling of being valued within the group. Each student knows they have something important to contribute, even if it's not the same as everyone else.
Yeah, it's like building a dream team where everyone's a superstar in their own way.
I love that. It's about recognizing that we all have different strengths and that by, working together, we can achieve so much more than we could alone.
This is making me rethink all those group projects I did back in school. But, okay, so diversifying communication, that's one big piece. What else does Hoerricks talk about?
She talks about the importance of scaffolding those group interactions, not just throwing them in and hoping for the best.
Oh, for sure. So that means actually teaching them those collaboration skills, right?
Exactly.
Like how to take turns, how to listen, how to disagree respectfully, all that stuff.
Exactly. And it's not just about preventing conflict. It's about making sure everyone feels heard and that all perspectives are, actually valued.
I see. So a student who might be hesitant to speak up in a big group might feel more comfortable in a smaller, more structured PPIG
Yeah.
where they know they'll be listened to.
Precisely. And it's not just about creating that safe space. It's about giving them the tools and the strategies they need to actually participate effectively.
So that might mean giving them sentence starters to help them get the conversation going, or even modeling how to ask questions or paraphrase what someone else said.
Exactly. It's all about giving them those tools to navigate those social interactions and become more confident communicators.
This is making me think about how we could all use a little more scaffolding in our lives, not just in school.
Yeah.
Whether it's teamwork at work or even just communicating with family, these skills are so important for building strong relationships.
Couldn't agree more. These are life skills for sure.
Okay, so we've got diversifying communication, scaffolding interactions. What else?
Well, Hoerricks also talks about incorporating activities that go beyond just discussion. Not every PPIG has to be centered around talking.
Oh, interesting. So what are some other options?
One great one is hands-on collaboration, Think about building a model together, conducting an experiment, creating a piece of art. In those activities, the talking becomes more of a tool to support the action rather than the main focus.
So it's about shifting the emphasis away from verbal expression to other forms of communication and collaboration.
Exactly. And it can be a fantastic way to engage students who learn best through, like, doing, or who might get overwhelmed by a lot of verbal input.
Plus, it's just more fun, right? There's something really cool about working together to create something you can actually see and touch.
Oh, for sure. And it can really help to build those teamwork and problem-solving skills and boost creativity.
Now, I remember we talked about silent collaboration earlier in the context of brainstorming. But
Yeah.
Hoerricks is saying it can be used for more than just that, right?
Right. Imagine a research project, for example. Each student could gather information on a different aspect of the topic, and then they come together to synthesize their findings, but all silently, using like a shared doc or a whiteboard.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would ensure everyone gets to contribute equally and that no one's ideas get lost.
Exactly. And it can really encourage that deep thinking and reflection, When you're not constantly talking or interrupting each other, there's more space to process and connect the dots.
It's like creating that mental space for those aha moments.
I love that. It's about slowing down and creating space for those moments of quiet contemplation that can lead to a deeper understanding.
It makes you think about how much we as a society value talking.
Mm.
We often equate talking with intelligence, leadership, success. But what if we're overlooking other forms of brilliance, other ways of knowing and being?
That's such a powerful question, and I think it's one that we need to keep asking ourselves, especially in a world that's becoming more and more complex and interconnected. We need to be open to different ways of thinking, different ways of communicating, different ways of being.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that diversity isn't just about race or gender. It's about diversity of thought, of experience, of expression.
Absolutely. And when we embrace that diversity, we create a richer, more vibrant world for everyone.
So we've talked about diversifying communication modes, scaffolding interactions, focusing on simple exchanges, but what about actually providing those individual supports within a PPIG? What does Hoerricks say about that?
Well, it all goes back to meeting students where they are and giving them the specific tools and resources they need to be successful.
Okay, so what are some examples of those individual supports? Like, what could that actually look like?
Well, one really simple but effective strategy is to provide students with advanced organizers, Those are basically like outlines or summaries that give them a preview of what the activity will be like. The goals, the roles, the structure, all that.
Makes sense, especially for students who might have trouble processing things quickly or who just need a little extra time to get ready for something new.
Exactly. It's about reducing anxiety and setting them up for success.
Okay, what about something more concrete, like checklists for specific tasks?
That's another great one. Give them a step-by-step list for their specific role, and it reduces their reliance on those, verbal instructions that can be hard to process. Plus, it gives them a clear sense of direction.
It's like a roadmap for participating in the group.
That's a great way to put it. And for some students, you might even want to provide them with like pre-written scripts or key phrases they can use during the activity. That can be super helpful for students who struggle with finding the right words or get nervous about speaking up in a group.
It's like giving them a little cheat sheet for those social interactions, which can be really tough for some kids.
Exactly. And it can make a world of difference for those who might otherwise feel lost or overwhelmed.
Now, we can't talk about supports without talking about peer support, right?
Yeah,
That's such a powerful thing.
totally. Hoerricks is a big believer in the power of peers. Students can learn so much from each other.
Sometimes even more than they learn from us adults, right?
It's true. Because they speak the same language, they get each other in a way that adults sometimes don't.
So how can teachers actually encourage that peer support within a PPIG?
Well, one way is to be really strategic about how you group students. Pair those who need a little extra help with those who are naturally more helpful and patient.
So it's about paying attention to those personality dynamics and creating groups where everyone feels comfortable and supported.
Exactly. And it's not just about creating those pairings, it's also about teaching students how to be good peer supporters.
So like teaching them how to explain things clearly, how to encourage each other, how to be good listeners.
Exactly. Giving them those skills to be good collaborators and supportive classmates.
It's pretty amazing to think about how much learning and growth can happen just from those interactions between students.
Absolutely. It's something we often overlook in traditional classrooms where the focus is so much on the teacher as the source of all knowledge.
Right, but when we create space for peer support, we're not just helping individual students, we're building a more collaborative and supportive learning environment for everyone.
And those skills will benefit them way beyond the classroom, in their future jobs, in their communities, in their relationships.
It's about building a more collaborative and compassionate world, one PPIG at a time.
Love that.
Okay, so we've talked about providing those advanced organizers, those task checklists, the pre-assigned scripts, and fostering that peer support. What other individual supports does Hoerricks recommend?
She also talks about how important it is for teachers to do those check-ins during group work, not just setting them loose and hoping for the best.
Oh, absolutely. Teachers need to be involved, right? Making sure things are on track, clearing up confusion, providing feedback.
Exactly. So that might mean walking around the room, observing the groups, checking in with individual students to make sure they're understanding, contributing, feeling supported, all that.
So it's about being present, being available to offer help if needed.
Right. And also about giving feedback that's specific, constructive, and encouraging.
So instead of just saying, good job, you might say something like, I really like how you paraphrased Sarah's point to make sure you understood. Or, I noticed you're really good at keeping the group focused. That's a great skill.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those individual contributions and giving feedback that helps them learn and grow.
And also noticing if someone needs extra help and then providing that support.
Yeah. Being responsive to those individual needs and adjusting your approach as you go.
It's interesting to think that those check-ins can also be opportunities for teachers to learn from their students.
Absolutely. By watching them work in groups, you can get such valuable insights into their learning styles, their strengths, their challenges, their social dynamics.
It's like a window into how they think and interact.
Exactly. And it can help teachers become more effective and create learning environments that are truly responsive to the needs of all learners.
Okay, so we've talked about individual supports during the activity itself, but what about assessment? How do we make that more inclusive and reflective of the whole collaborative nature of PPIGs?
That's the million-dollar question. It's definitely an area where traditional practices often fall short. Hoerricks suggests moving beyond those individual performance measures, like tests or essays, and incorporating more authentic and collaborative forms of assessment.
Interesting. So what are some alternatives?
Well, one option is to have groups submit a written summary of their work, highlighting their key findings and how they got there.
Okay, so that assesses not just what they learned, but also those collaborative skills that are so important for PPIGs.
Exactly. And it lets them show their understanding in a way that's more in line with how they actually worked.
What about having them create something visual, like a poster or a diagram or a mind map?
That's a great idea. It taps into those visual spatial strengths that some students have, and it gives them something tangible to share and be proud of.
And it can be fun. It's a more engaging way to show what they've learned.
For sure. And remember, assessment shouldn't just be about evaluating them. It should be about giving them feedback that helps them grow.
So providing written feedback on the project or maybe having a follow-up discussion with the group to like debrief and see what they learned.
Exactly. It's about using assessment as a tool for learning, not just a way to measure performance.
It's about creating a feedback loop that helps them see their strengths, see where they can improve, and feel motivated to keep learning.
And it's about remembering that learning is a journey, not a destination.
That's so true. As we've been talking about all these different strategies, one thing that keeps coming up for me is this idea of shifting our perspective.
Mhm.
It's not just about changing what we do, it's about changing how we think.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from that old deficit-based model where we focus on what students can't do and try to fix them.
And instead, we're embracing a strengths-based approach.
Right.
Recognizing and celebrating what makes each student unique.
Exactly. It's about creating learning environments that are truly inclusive, where every student feels welcome, respected, and supported in just being themselves.
And where they all have the chance to learn, to grow, to reach their full potential.
Love that. One thing Hoerricks really emphasizes is adjusting the role of talk in TPIGs. We've touched on this, but it's worth digging a little deeper, I think.
Yeah, for sure. We often just assume that talking is the main way to communicate in groups, but as we've been saying, it's not always the most effective or inclusive way.
Totally. So how can we adjust that role of talk to make PPIGs better for all learners?
That's a good question. What does Hoerricks suggest?
Well, one thing is to focus on those simple exchanges, like we talked about earlier, teaching students to get their point across clearly and concisely without getting lost in the weeds.
So making those conversations more purposeful, more efficient.
Right. Another thing is to reinforce the talk with other modalities. Pair those spoken ideas with visuals, actions, written notes. That makes them more accessible and memorable.
Well, that's a good idea. So instead of just saying, we need to measure this object, you might show them how to use a ruler, have them write down the measurement, and then maybe draw a diagram with the measurements labeled.
Exactly. You're providing multiple ways for them to access and process the information, and you're creating a more multisensory learning experience, which can be really powerful.
And it recognizes that not everyone learns the same way. Some might need those extra supports to really get it.
Totally. And for others, those supports might not even be necessary for understanding, but they might just enhance their learning or help them remember better.
It's about making the experience richer and more engaging for everyone. What else does Hoerricks suggest?
Well, she's also big on allowing for processing time, giving students a moment of silence to think before they have to respond verbally.
That's so important. We often forget that not everyone processes information at the same speed, and we can put kids on the spot by expecting an immediate answer.
For sure. By giving them that processing time, we're creating a more relaxed and equitable environment. And we're saying that it's okay to think before you speak.
It's about respecting those different thinking styles and processing speeds, which can lead to more thoughtful and insightful conversations.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got focusing on simple exchanges, reinforcing talk with other stuff, allowing for processing time. What else?
Anything else?
Oh, yeah. She also talks about using visual timers to help students manage their time and stay on track, especially for those who struggle with time management or get anxious about deadlines.
So instead of saying you have 5 minutes left, you might set a visual timer that everyone can see with a clear countdown.
Right. And for some students, you might even give them individual timers that they can control. They can pause if they need a break or rewind if they need to go back and look at something.
I like that. It gives them a sense of control over their time, which can really help with anxiety.
Totally. And it can be helpful for teachers, too, because it gives a clear structure and helps everyone stay on task.
Now, another strategy she mentions is using nonverbal cues to communicate expectations and provide feedback.
Yes, this can be so powerful, especially for students who are really sensitive to verbal input or who might misunderstand those verbal cues.
Oh yeah, so instead of saying, it's time to wrap up, you might use a hand gesture or a visual signal to show that it's time to move on.
Exactly. And you can use those cues for positive reinforcement, too.
Like a thumbs up or a smile to show that they're doing a good job.
You got it. Those little things can be so powerful, and they can create a much more positive and supportive environment.
It's amazing how much thought goes into creating these inclusive spaces.
It's true. But we've talked a lot about the practical strategies, but we have to remember that they're not just a bunch of techniques. It's deeper than that.
It's about a whole philosophy, a whole way of thinking about education. Right.
Exactly. They come from a belief that all students can learn and that all students deserve a fair chance.
It's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach that's been around for so long.
And instead, we're embracing the idea that difference is a good thing. It's something to celebrate. Because when we value diversity, when we see each student's strengths and challenges as assets, that's when the real magic happens.
That's beautiful. And it's not just about the students, right? Teachers have to believe in their own ability to create these inclusive spaces, to grow and adapt alongside their students.
Absolutely. It's hard work, for sure, and it can be messy. But when you see a student who finally feels seen and understood, when they're contributing in a way that works for them, it's so rewarding.
It's about those aha moments, not just for the students, but for the teachers, too. Realizing that we can actually do this, that we can build a better world, one student, one classroom, one school at a time.
You said it?
It's interesting you bring up families, because Hoerricks' work is really focused on the classroom.
Yeah.
But you're right, that connection between school and home, that can make all the difference.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Families, they're the experts on their own kids, right? They know all the little things, the strengths, the struggles, those quirks that a teacher might miss, especially early on.
So how do we move beyond those standard parent-teacher conferences?
Mm-hmm.
How do we really make families partners in this whole inclusivity thing?
I think communication is key. And it has to go both ways, Not just teachers sending out info, but actually asking families for their input. What works at home? What strategies have they tried that work well?
And what are their goals for their child? Not just grades, but socially, emotionally, the whole picture, right?
Exactly. It's about building that trust and a shared understanding of what the student needs. And remembering that families are often dealing with a lot of other stuff too, medical appointments, therapy, all that.
Yeah, it's a lot. So teachers being empathetic and flexible, that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Not just saying, here's the school rules, but more like, how can we work together to support your child?
Exactly. When a family feels heard and respected, they're way more likely to be involved, and that benefits everyone.
Now, you mentioned technology earlier, and Hawks doesn't get into that much in this piece.
Yeah.
But we both know how much it can change things for inclusive learning, right?
Oh, absolutely. Assistive tech has come so far, it's amazing. We're talking tools that can literally give a voice to students who haven't had one, or open up new ways to interact with the world, things that weren't possible before.
It's mind-blowing. A student who struggles with writing can now create incredible digital art. Or someone with dyslexia has a whole library at their fingertips with audiobooks and text-to-speech.
And it's not just about overcoming challenges. Tech can also open up whole new ways of learning for all students. Think virtual field trips, historical simulations, online platforms where kids from all over the world can connect and learn from each other.
Wow, yeah, it's incredible. It feels like we're at this point where tech isn't just an extra thing, it's like a fundamental part of education now.
And it's our job as educators and advocates to make sure it's being used ethically, equitably, and for everyone. That's a whole other conversation.
We'll have to save that one for another deep dive. But speaking of other episodes, as we wrap up this one on Hoerricks' work, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they go about their day?
That's a good question. We've covered so much, so many great strategies, but I keep coming back to that idea of mindset, It's not just about checking boxes or using the newest tech. It's about really shifting how we think about learning and learners.
So moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach that's been around for so long.
Exactly. Embracing the idea that difference is a good thing, something to celebrate. When we value diversity, when we see each student's strengths and challenges as assets, that's when things get really interesting.
And it's not just about the students, right? Teachers have to believe they can do this, create these inclusive spaces, and learn and grow along with their students.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard work, it's messy, there's no easy answer. But when you see a student finally thriving because they feel seen and understood, because they're contributing in a way that works for them, that's what keeps you going.
It's about those aha moments for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Right? Realizing we can do this. We can build a better world. One student, one classroom, one school at a time.
Powerful stuff. And it's not just about schools either. These ideas, UDL, inclusivity, they apply everywhere. Workplaces, communities, families.
It's like a way of life, being open to different perspectives, seeing the value in everyone, and creating spaces where everyone can truly thrive.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
So to our listener, we leave you with this. Look around your own world. Your work, your community, your relationships. Where can you apply these principles? How can you be a champion for inclusivity, not just in what you say, but in what you do?
Now that's a question worth thinking about.
It is. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.